Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We have a special guest of sorts later on. We've got a pre-recorded interview with someone that I'm going to play towards the second half. But for the first half an hour or so, I will spend the time with your good selves. Looking forward to seeing your comments as well. Let me just get this on the screen so don't forget them. Yep, so do a fire in your comments. I'm pretty well back into the normal swing of family party business now, having been very tied up with a court case a couple of weeks ago now. That's we're not quite at the end of it, but there's a tale to tell there. There is a huge tale to tell, but we'll save that for a little while yet. That's something you can look forward to hearing all about. It's been quite an experience, let's put it that way. Now, we've had a few interesting experiences in the last couple of weeks. Last Wednesday, we went to the attempted screening of adult human female at Edinburgh University. That was cancelled again because a handful of, I wouldn't say thugs, that would be me, students, young people, whatever, I don't know, with masks on and a couple of Antifa flags stood in front of the door. So the university gave up and cancelled the whole event. So all the ticket holders had to go home and they were thwarted. There's a video on that on the Scottish Family Party YouTube channel that Phil Holden has made. It's absolutely brilliant. So do go and watch that video. It's really, really good. A part of what you'll see in it is the so-called cabaret against hate speech. How many were there? I don't know, maybe 80, maybe a few more. No, quite a few of them in any case. And their lead singer, who is a stripper. They recognized me. I was just standing opposite watching a crowd of people. They recognized me in any case. So they started sort of taunting me and abusing me and whatever. And so I just sat there and watched. I started filming a bit of it. And then some of the people came over and were, sort of fairly intimidating, making physical contact with me, doing things like right in my face, very much so in my face. They're just trying to be provocative to get some sort of reaction. And you can see that in the video. You can see it. It was an interesting evening. We've been wondering what we could do to Edinburgh University. But is that all it takes to get something cancelled? Handful of people, a bit of sellotape and a flag. Now, how about if we turned up under whatever banner with a bit of sellotape and a flag and tried to get something cancelled? Do you think that would work? I don't think it would. I think they'd be on the phone to the police immediately and they'd get dragged off and say, we're not having this. Our events, our university life is going to go on unimpeded by you lot, and you'd soon be dragged off. But because this was on a particular theme, the university took a different approach. Right, a few more things have been in the news. There's a news story in the Herald today, and a shock horror headline. SPUC, Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, had been going in and conducting lessons in some schools, mainly Catholic schools, I would guess. And there's horror. These pupils getting an unbalanced view. The vast majority of school children in Scotland get a totally one-sided government-sponsored message on abortion. Absolutely one-sided. Basically, if you get pregnant, these are your options. You can have the baby, you can give it up for adoption, or you can have an abortion. Take your pick, whichever one suits you. There's no moral consideration. That's basically the message from the government. But the fact that some pupils are hearing a pro-life message, that really winds some people up. They're thinking, how can this be allowed to happen? Surely in Scottish schools, it's supposed to be wall-to-wall progressive, secular, liberal values. And everyone knows that, don't they? How dare a school allow anyone in with a different viewpoint? And that was an article in the Herald. I wrote a letter to them about it. I published the text on Facebook today. So I would imagine it's probably quite likely the Herald will publish that tomorrow, but let's wait and see. Another issue has been on the go this week has been the idea of juryless trials for rape and sexual assault cases. That's something that's very concerning. It's not driven by a concern for justice. It's driven by feminist campaigners who basically the rape and sexual assault, the perpetrators are mainly male, the victims are mainly female. Therefore, it's a gendered issue. Therefore, they want more people to be convicted. Not so much we want to make sure the right people get convicted. They just want more people to be convicted. So they're suggested, this is actually going to happen. There's a pilot scheme going to start soon. They're just going to do away with juries and have one judge making the decision instead. And that would be a judge who is under significant pressure to give the right answer. In other words, to convict. If they don't convict, they know they'll have to give an account for their actions. So really undermining justice. I've recorded a video about that today. I'll publish that in a couple of days' time. You can look out for that. John Naples Campbell, remember our friend, I think he's a special GTCS, General Teaching Council of Scotland, representative and consultant with regard to LGBT issues. He's also a drag performer, and he's got some very interesting content on his social media. So I'm going to make another video about him. He's just been appointed or reappointed the deputy head teacher of a school in the Highlands. And I think a lot of people are not happy about that. And I'm just going to show you some of the content and see what you think about this person being a deputy head teacher, or, well, any sort of teacher of your children. Because some of his content is, I would say, quite concerning. Right, and another issue that's coming up our agenda, we'll be doing something on soon, is eugenics. Because the Glasgow Eugenics Centre, they don't call themselves that, that's what it really is alive and kicking, based within the Glasgow, is it called the Glasgow Central Hospital? And basically you can go in there and choose your components to make a baby. It's a bit like Build-A-Bear. Remember when you Build-A-Bear, where you sort of pick the things and make up the bear that you want? But that's the idea only for human babies. You choose, for example, a sperm donor out of the catalogue, have a look at what qualifications they've got, see a photograph of them, read a letter by them, hear them saying, etc., etc. Then you pick them out of a catalogue, and it goes on from there. So Glasgow Eugenics Centre is going to come under our attention before too long, under our spotlight. So there's been a lot of content flying around recently. We've been sharing on social media about the benefits of marriage, and also the benefits of sexual abstinence until marriage as well, which is not a Scottish Family Party policy. Particularly, I think young people should be made aware of the facts with regard to that. But the fact is that the more sexual partners someone has, generally speaking, then the lower their chance of a stable relationship in the future. And the optimum strategy for stable family life is people who move in together and have sex for the first time when they get married. That's the optimum. Statistically, that seems to be the optimum. And that's a pretty important fact. And we think that's something that young people at school ought to know about, just so they can make their own decisions in the light of the evidence. They don't need to know about, well, I won't even mention the thing. I don't like having to keep talking about them. But some things that, rather not mention, but they could learn useful facts like that. Now, just to say, I don't say this very often in the live stream, but if there is anyone watching who's not a member of the Scottish Family Party, I can't possibly imagine why that would be. And now might be a good time just to go over to our website while you're listening and sign up. I had a couple of new members today. So, if you want to join the Scottish Family Party, do go over there and sign up right now. Right, the Greens in government. How are things going with the Greens? Well, I think the spell's been broken to some extent. And some people are being a bit more sceptical towards them. They've come up with this policy where something like 10% of Scotland's coastline is going to be declared sort of untouchable. You can't do anything on it. You can't go and collect shellfish. You can't fish. It's just a crazy idea. A real blunt instrument policy, just designed to make the city-dwelling Greens feel better that they're doing something to protect the environment. Whereas the people who actually live on the coast, and probably are actually more concerned about it, actually are outraged by it. So that's quite controversial. The bottle recycling scheme, haven't said much about that. My main take on the bottle recycling scheme is I understand that the details are terrible and it's not going to work and it's just badly managed. Okay, I find that entirely believable. But I would say, even if it was the brilliant scheme that was just going to be fantastically implemented, I think that it's playtime. It's the Greens just playing with their pet projects. It's not a priority in Scotland to just push up the percentage of bottles recycled very slightly. I mean, most people recycle this sort of thing in any case. It's not a priority. It's playtime. It's just their pet project, their hobby horses, rather than tackling the real issues that Scotland faces. Now, remember the much heralded free bus transport for, is it under 25s in Scotland? They really bang on about that. I love how they introduce these things where they give things away. Then when people take the things that are free, they say it just shows how successful it's been. Well, of course it's successful. But if you have policies to stand in George Square giving out £10 notes, and 200,000 people came to collect one, wow, just shows how successful our policy was. Well, of course it is. If you give people something for nothing. But apparently some bus routes have had to be withdrawn. Some drivers have been reluctant to drive certain routes. I understand maybe even refusing to drive certain routes, because what some young people are doing is using the bus as a common room. It's nice and warm, it's free, you enjoy the view as you have a drive round. So if you want somewhere to sit and have a laugh and maybe have a drink and mess around in the evening, don't wander the streets, just go and sit on a bus all night and drive around wherever you like. And that seems to be what's happening, and it's creating problems. Let's right though, Peter. We're okay for prom. I misread that when I first read it. I read it as porn, but okay, right, that's a relief. Problem with social media using the family party logo. Right, I'm not sure what a prom reel is, but go ahead and use our logo. In fact, if you want to email me, I'll supply you with the proper file for you to use if you want to do something like that. That sounds interesting. Right, John, pro-life message has been taken to schools for over 30 years. Why complain now? Right, that's a good point. And then basically, that any time anything other than a socially liberal or progressive so-called message has been delivered in the school, there's some people who will object because they really think that goes against the settled order of nature for children to hear anything other than the Scottish government's position on these things. So people become more and more outraged when they become aware that other perspectives are being shared. So, yeah, good point. Good point. Now, let me tell you about a little plan that we've been. Well, Niall Fraser and I have been discussing a plan. You probably know Niall. We've been thinking about doing a weekly press conference style event where we just sum up and comment on the news stories of the week. Maybe do it on a Friday or Saturday, so it's spaced out from the live stream. So we're thinking of one option would be to do it as a live stream like this. Another option would be to actually, get in a room. So we're standing at a podium or sitting behind a table or something. So it's got a different look to it. It's a sort of press conference. Look, we're not expecting any press to come to it yet, but we thought that might be something that would be good. It's a good way of again summarising more news content. Sometimes if we have a guest on the live stream, there isn't that much time for talking about what's been going on in the week. So if we had this slot, it wouldn't be an hour. It would be a lot shorter than that. Maybe on a Friday afternoon or first thing on a Saturday morning. We thought that might be a good addition to the family party output. So we're considering piloting that. So we're just looking at arrangements of that, where to do it, how to do it. So keep your eyes open. When you see that, do let us know what you think. If that's something you think you'd appreciate, that you'd watch every week, then we might well go ahead with that. So you see how many members there are in the Scottish Family Party. Now, you find political parties. Now, note I did bring this question up here, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. Political parties generally don't talk about their memberships, generally because they're embarrassed by them, because they'd like to have a lot more members. So let's say for the Scottish Family Party, our membership is hundreds, not thousands. Let's put it that way. And we would like that to change. The other thing with membership statistics, as soon as you give them, if they go down, you then really like if you give them when you're on the up, because you're showing off about them. That's what the SNP did. They boasted about their membership. Then when it goes down again, you don't want to say, so it becomes a secret, and you're in a bit of a muddle. So most parties take the quite sensible strategy. I think they basically don't talk about them. So whether they go up or down, it's not a PR problem. Because if your party is having a tough time and your membership's going down, the last thing you want is to pour fuel on the fire by having to admit that your membership's gone down. So most parties think you're better off not talking about it. The income of the family party is public knowledge. I think our income for this year is probably from regular membership, regular donors, so small donations through the year, maybe about £40,000 a year. That's our income at the moment. For an election campaign, we'd hope to raise tens of thousands of pounds as well for an election campaign coming up, which we'll need to do for the Westminster election. So that was not a full answer to your question, but I've explained the situation. I'm sure something was complete madness. I'm not sure which part of it was, but yeah, I'm sure you agree with me there. Right, Charles, I said every weekly news slot. So, right, Alejandro is happy with my answer as well. So that's great. One more thing I was going to mention. I was on UK column on Monday lunchtime, and quite a few of you might watch UK column as well. And we're talking about international education. And I was really pleased to be on there talking about it. David Scott, who I know very well, he's a great guy, very good speaker, very good researcher, etc. Well worth listening to. He was bringing up the issue of international education in Scottish schools. And the first thing I said to him, it's just so fantastic that someone else is talking about it. Because I've been talking about it for years as the lone voice in the wilderness with virtually no attention to it whatsoever anywhere else. But he picked up on it from a different angle than me, and we were able to talk about it. But basically in Scotland schools, part of the curriculum is international education, and it amounts to just point blank political indoctrination. So Scotland withdrew from the PISA test, maths and English, because they didn't really capture the essence of Scottish education. Translation, Scotland was plummeting down the league tables. It would get really embarrassing. So they pulled out of those. And instead, they've entered the International Education League. So they were assessed for it for the first time. It might have been last year. They did pretty well, needless to say. Political indoctrination. Scottish education is very strong in that area. And the assessment includes questions like immigrants should be able to vote. I see myself as a citizen of the world. I have boycotted a company for environmental reasons. I mean, this is not education. I have attended an event promoting gender equality. So if you're a teacher, you think, right, your mission is to get the right answers out of these kids. If you want them to, sign an environmental petition, the best thing to do is, okay, class, let's all go online. Here's a petition. Can you all sign it, please? Then at least next time you'll be able to tick the box, and we'll go up the International Education League table. So how this has been implemented in different schools, I don't know. I would imagine it might be quite low key and quite inchoate in some ways in most schools. But the intention behind it is it is going to be, I think it will become over time, a much more explicit and determined attempt to mold the political values of our young people. The man behind it at the OECD, he said, if this had been in place earlier, the Brexit vote probably wouldn't have happened. Okay, I mean, how open can you get? So open admission that if this type of education had been implemented earlier, the political views of the people of the UK probably would have been different. I mean, the total point blank, straight out admission that it's influencing the political values of young people. So yeah, that's international education. I made a video about it. It was quite a long time ago, about 4 years ago now. But it's very interesting. It's still ongoing in Scotland. So it was great to hear someone else picking up on it. Me too. Increase my monthly payment. Music to my ears. Music to my ears. If everyone wants to change anything about membership, just email members@scottishfamily.org, and you'll get in touch with my wife, who does a great job of administrating the membership. And that's one of the nice parts of it, is putting up people's monthly payments. Weekly news slot. Good idea. How long should that be? How long should it be? We're thinking just 20 minutes, something like that, but pretty quick fire roundup of the issues. And then maybe in the future, we'd think about maybe having an audience, maybe having some questions, but we're thinking, something quite brief. So something just, to watch over breakfast on a Saturday morning, rather than to really settle down with a cup of coffee too. Right. Is it time to bring in our special guest? Charles once more. 20 minutes, not very long. Yeah, it'll be a compromise. We'll see how it goes. We'll do a pilot before too long. I'll get in touch with now, but we've got a few ideas of where to do it and how to do it. So watch this space. Now, our special guest today, this is a pre-recorded interview. It's a man called Aaron Edwards, who is a theologian at Cliff College. Cliff College is run by the Methodist Church. It's a theological college in Derbyshire. I have to tell you, full disclosure here, I'm a graduate of Cliff College. I did a postgraduate degree there, a master's degree there around the year 2000 to 2002 as a part-time student. Really enjoyed it. But Aaron's was working at the college, and well, I won't steal his thunder. We'll go to the interview now. Interviewing him is, different backdrop. Yes, we'll do that. Interviewing is Gareth Kirk, who is our chairman. I can't remember what his region's called exactly, but he's the chairman in Biggar, in any case, the Scottish Family Party's branch in Biggar. So Gareth is going to talk to Aaron, and it is quite a tale. So do stay and watch this. I'll interact with the comments during this as well. But here we go.
So welcome, Aaron, to the Scottish Family Party show or the evening live stream. This is now a recorded session. Do you want to just give an explanation, a brief introduction to who you are and explain what happened?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Aaron Edwards, and I am a theologian, Christian theologian. So I teach theology, and I've been teaching at Bible College for the last 7 years. Before that, I taught in the University of Aberdeen, actually. So I was in Scotland for 5 years, and in the nice bracing north wind, which I would say enjoyed. I guess it was bracing, is what I'll say. It was nice and sunny up there though sometimes. So we did enjoy our time up in Scotland. So now I've been at a Bible college in Derbyshire for 7 years, and very recently I posted a tweet where I said homosexuality is invading the church. Evangelicals no longer see the severity of this because they're busy apologizing for their apparently barbaric homophobia, whether or not this is true. I said, this is a gospel issue, by the way, because if sin is no longer sin, then we no longer have need of a savior. And so I was making a point to say that at the very moment when the church is under attack from very aggressive LGBT lobbying, that's the moment where we decide the biggest problem in the church is homophobia. In churches that are conservative and care about free speech and care about orthodox Christian doctrine. And I just, from my experience of working with lots of evangelical churches over the last 20 years, I don't actually think I've ever seen a very clear instance of homophobia in any of them, in anything from the pulpit. So I'd be very surprised if my experience was just completely random. And now I do think there's probably loads of homophobic Christians out there, and there'll be homophobic churches, but I don't think it was the mainstream. I don't think the vast majority of the people who've apologized of late are apologizing because they really think they're sorry for something they've done that's wrong. I think they're doing it because they know they have to, because of the pressure the world puts on them to do so. A little bit in the same way how white people are apologizing for their whiteness because they're being told that they're racist. And then if they don't say that they're sorry for something historically, whether it happened 200 or 300 years ago, people will call them racist. So in order to not be called a racist, you just have to apologize anyway. And so the same with homophobia. Let me just say, I'm so sorry for anyone who's ever been hurt by anything I've ever said. You think, okay, if you have something to say sorry for, please say sorry and repent. But don't say sorry if you don't think you've actually done anything wrong. I think that's a really dangerous thing to do. It sets a very bad precedent. So that was kind of what was in the background for me at the time of the same-sex relationship blessings in the Church of England. Of course, in the Church of Scotland, I was in Aberdeen when the Church of Scotland was going through all of this. I knew pastors who had to leave the Church of Scotland over that issue, and they were dragged through the mud for it in the press and in their own denomination, and they really fought the battle on it. So I know a lot about these situations and how it comes through, and so I just haven't been happy with how many churches have responded to it. Either the ones who agree, they agree silently because they feel like they can't speak out, or if they're going to say anything about their orthodox traditional view of marriage, they're going to caveat it with 1,000 apologies first. And I just find it a bit disingenuous. And I think that it's really bowing to the pressure of what's going on in society in the West more broadly, the progressive agenda, which is silencing many people from being able to say what they really want to say. So me tweeting what I tweeted caused a bit of a Twitter storm. And immediately there were calls to get me sacked, and I was, having to respond on social media to say, actually, I'm saying this is my view, and it's a view that was addressed about a doctrinal issue. This is not me attacking gay people. This is me just saying this is an issue for the church. I'm not even saying, homosexuality is invading society. Though it could be said that is the case as well, but that's not the point I was making. I wouldn't really make that point. That's a different thing. I'm talking about the church, and the church gets to define, Christians get to define when they think something's invading, and homosexuality doesn't, within Christian belief, doesn't have a positive place. There isn't a positive version of homosexuality in terms of the practice of it. There are clearly going to be people who are same-sex attracted, who would call themselves gay, and they're not unwelcome to come to church and hear the gospel, but they can't say, I'm homosexual and God loves the fact that I'm homosexual, I'm going to marry this person who's of the same sex, and expect God to be happy with that, expect the church in the global south to be happy with that, because they're not going to be. And so that's me. So I was kind of advocating for those Christians who want to who see this as a problem and who want to respond appropriately, and that means standing on what you believe, not just kowtowing to whatever the latest progressive agenda is. And that's what I think we need to be doing more and more, and I see it happening less and less, and I think that's a worrying sign, because Christianity exists in places like England and Scotland. It's a long way from Jerusalem, and it exists in places like this. There's churches all over Scotland because there were people who believed it, whether even the first early missionaries to Britain, but then think of the likes of John Knox and the impact he would have in Scotland. Give me Scotland lest I die. There are people who want to say, I want to impact society with this good news of the gospel. And so now that good news is being tainted as bad news. So it's been called bad. And Christians need to stand up and declare what they believe. So that's kind of all I did. And I got in trouble for it, basically.
so a little more than in trouble. Yeah. So I mean, they ultimately took an action and decided to terminate your contract.
Yeah. So it happened very quickly. I got the first thing the college did, the Cliff College, the Evangelical Methodist College that I was working at. The first thing they did was to respond on Twitter publicly, saying this was inappropriate, unacceptable. Not even addressing me. Wow. Responding to the mob, going, we are aware that a lecturer has posted something. Let me just say unequivocally, the language is inappropriate, unacceptable, doesn't represent our views or our ethos. And I kind of thought that's interesting, because it's an evangelical college, so it must represent the view in some way.
Yes.
But what they meant by that is we don't like the language of invading, and we think some people are calling it homophobic. I said it's absolutely not homophobic.
Yeah.
And I'll go to the hilt on that, because it's quite obvious if anyone wants to understand it. It was read as homophobic, but that's different to actually it being homophobic, and you can see it.
Yeah. So it's not hate speech, like in
no. Yeah. I mean, people thought it was. There were secular atheists who were pro-LGBT, obviously, who want to use that as an opportunity to say this is vile hate speech.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, it's a perfectly defensible thing. I didn't just spew this out in some rant against gay people. I've been thinking about this for a long time and reflecting on these issues. I've been already engaging on social media, online, on my podcast, on my blog, in academic books even. Not so much using the language homosexuality is invading the church, but using the kind of language to say that we need to be thinking about very seriously about how we express ourselves on these issues, and to speak strongly and sometimes sternly when we see something encroaching upon our beliefs and our values, which we're within. The church is within its own entitlement to defend those, because we have scripture. We believe in the Bible as authority. I know that many others don't believe in the Bible as their authority, and they're welcome to their belief, but I want us to be welcome to ours as well. And so that I wasn't, so Cliff College then sort of said, we're a place that respects different views, and we respect all these different views, as their response to my tweet, which is fascinating, because they were basically saying your view's not welcome, but all these other views are welcome. And they're now kind of backtracking on that, trying to say, oh no, we didn't say that you couldn't hold the traditional view of marriage, because there are people at Cliff College who do still hold the traditional view of marriage. But I was trying to argue that you're not really able to declare the implications of that view, which means same-sex marriage is sinful and under God's judgment. It's not something that you can just say, well, we just agree to disagree. If you believe something's sinful and you're a Christian who cares about that, it's actually important for you to be able to express it. And especially doctrinally, if you believe that there's a doctrine coming into the church which has come from the wider secular society and is invading, it's not a welcome thing that came from the Bible, within our own storehouse, as it were. It's come from outside. So invasion, I defend that language because I think it's quite appropriate. It's also how lots of biblical writers speak about sin when it comes into the church. We've had thousands of years of God inspiring people, according to Christians' belief. I know you'll have many listeners who aren't Christians. I hope to, maybe there'll be Christians by the end of the podcast. We hope, if I keep talking about the Bible. But I think there's so much in the Bible about prophets who speak out against sin within the people of Israel or to the church, and they need to speak quite strongly about it. And there's a particular judgment upon when people try to sort of say that sin isn't sin anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing with the kind of rainbow flag agenda into the church in all sorts of different ways. So this is the time, I would say, when we need to stand up and fight and stand up strongly. When I say fight, I don't mean like going and attacking people. I just mean saying stand up and fight for what you believe. I say this is what we believe. We're free to say this. This is how Christianity not only got going, it's how it sustained itself. It's how it changed the whole world, because people were willing to believe it and live out what it really says.
Yeah.
And so that's what the British Methodism, I didn't quite understand that and just saw it as homophobic. And then all of the complaints came in. The college suspended me. And then after investigation, wildly imbalanced investigation, which didn't have a single piece of evidence cited in my favor, an impartial, unprejudiced investigation, I was then dismissed after a disciplinary hearing. Now I could tell the principal, when in doing that, he was torn, because he knew that it would have implications for our family, and so he was trying to, say I'm trying to show compassion here, and I understood that it was difficult for him, but also I did say, this is still the decision you're making. You're still making this decision.
You are still responsible for it.
Still responsible for it, and it's hard, it's difficult, and this is now going to cause him a lot of flack, and it's not. And I said, it's not. I'm going to have to keep talking about this, and it's nothing personal, but this is a belief, and you've now made a decision, and you've got to stand by the decision. I've made my decision. I'm standing by it. Now they've got to make their decision, and I think they're now coming under a lot of attack from evangelicals to say, I thought you called yourself an evangelical college, and
yes, I
think they misunderstood. For me, I think they backed the wrong horse. They backed the wrong Twitter storm, because there's the progressive Twitter storm, which was bringing hate on me. They got their way. I got fired, but when I got fired, it kind of goes into the press, and now, like, global Christianity is aware that this college is saying it's evangelical, but has such a different nuance of what that means, that it doesn't really stand up for what it really believes. They disagree, but I think that's what's happened.
And so just understanding, putting it into an analogy, maybe you have the box, which is defined by Christianity, which has its integrity based off the Bible, and you as a theologian are the kind of person who's interpreting that, looking at that, and I guess that's the purpose of theology, is that you are studying what this, where the boundaries of this box lies within society, etc. So you are fully right to describe where you think the boundary line of sin is, and so for me, you should be able to establish and have that debate. I think for the Scottish Family Party, like one of their key principles is do no harm. So just because you state your boundary, and by having the debate, it's probably more effective and more important to have the debate and actually listen to the arguments of the one side, or listen to the other. For you wouldn't be necessarily saying, well, I don't want to hear what anyone else says. It's having the understanding, having the debate, having that discussion, but being free to say what you think is important. So the difficulty I have with this is you simply said what you felt you believed was important, and I totally understand it. In the Bible it says this is sin, and that's within the box. That's a Christian concept of sin. Outside Christianity, anyone who's not Christian, that's irrelevant. It's either beneficial for makes you happy, or doesn't make you happy. There's no concept of consequence of sin. But within the Christian definition, you are saying where this boundary lies, and for that to be eroded, to say, well, people on the outside of that are saying, well, actually, no, we're going to define what is acceptable, what is not. Now is taking something, it's taken over that part of the box. And the difficulty with that is, well, then where's the line? And I think for you, I think why are you saying this is strongly important is because I, as a theologian, am studying this, and I'm coming to the conclusion this is where the line is. This is what's defined in Christian by text, by the Bible. So someone would have to defend the argument, saying, "Well, in the Bible it says it's okay because that's now the boundary can move because it's being defined within the box as Christianity."
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there's the political analogy of the Overton window, isn't there, which is increasingly helpful. Of what is the current acceptable level of speech? What are you allowed to say and not allowed to say? And that's just shifted so fast in the last 5 or 6 years that no one can really keep up. So the kind of progressive changes of terminology, and of course you've had issues with that in Scotland of late, and people coming under fire for what they are and aren't allowed to say. And so very quickly the kind of classic political correctness problems have just exacerbated really, really fast, and people are just trying to keep up with the latest glossary of terms that are or aren't harmful. So though, you know, the Scottish Family Party may have the ideal to do no harm, well, people will say that you are doing harm by expressing your view. So my view, when I expressed it, was called harmful. So I then had Cliff College students who are LGBT going, oh, now I don't know if I could feel safe in his classroom. Even people who've known me and know that I'm not homophobic and know that I'm respecting other people's right to disagree with me. I don't kind of lambast them and say, you must agree with me or shout them down. But I am allowed to say it strongly, especially when I'm speaking to people within that box, as it were, who are evangelical, who stand upon supposedly the authority of the Bible. But the sneaky thing that happens now is people can always say, well, there's so many different interpretations of the Bible. You're just a narrow, crazy, fanatical conservative. We're just a little bit more open and generous and kind, kinder than God, it would seem. In terms of they can give their blessings to things that every Christian up until the 20th century ever would not have thought this was even conceivable. And now apparently, as I said, that the Church of England can give its blessing to God giving his blessing for same-sex marriage or same-sex relationships. And I just think, and it's obviously going to end up in marriage anyway, that it's just incremental, as many things happen in politics. Look, we'll just change this, and bit by bit things will change. I was just in a meeting earlier today with a great organisation called Christian Concern, who are kind of banging the drum of this around the country. I think they're going to come to do something in Scotland, so watch out, Scotland. They're good. And there was a Nigerian pastor who said many years ago he was in number 10 Downing Street and having a conversation with the Prime Minister and other leaders where they were talking about when kind of civil partnerships were first coming in for same-sex couples, and they said at the time, we absolutely guaranteed we will never touch marriage. I totally understand this is a religious thing that's in your box, and we will respect that. That will never happen. And he's just saying it was lies. It was lies.
Yeah.
They knew what they would. Either the person, they knew eventually this was going to happen. It was an incremental thing. And so, well, if we just get this in, then this will happen, then this will happen, and then eventually. Yeah. People used to say, it wouldn't ever, marriage wouldn't even be touched, but of course it was. So then it became civil marriage, which even then, I wouldn't even have said, I wouldn't go and die on that hill and go, oh, I'm so annoyed that gay people get to get married. That's within their rights to do what they want. But if someone calls himself a Christian, wants to come into the church and be married in the church, it's a completely different thing.
That is completely,
you're then stepping on, and you're stepping under a different set of authority and structure, which again, I understand people disagreeing with, and gay people can live lives however they want. And there are consequences for how they live their lives. So though they don't recognize, any non-Christian or any Christian even won't always recognize sin, but there still are consequences of sin, even if they don't cognitively kind of process what those are, because they say, I don't believe in it. Well, it believes in you, as it were. Sin is having an effect on you, whether you believe it is or not, and it will have consequences one day.
Yeah.
But let's not get into hellfire and judgment. I don't want to put off your listeners from this lovely, hearty podcast. But just to say that sin matters to God, and that's why people like me, who would be called harmful for saying that it's a problem and we need to repent of sin, but there's good news out there, and that's what the gospel is. But it stops us being able to preach the gospel if we can't really tell you what the problem is. There's bad news. It's like having cancer. It's like me going along saying that cancer is really bad. It's an invasion into your body, and we need to get rid of it. Don't be so horrible to me. That's what I am. I'm kind of that's in my identity as a cancer sufferer. So how dare you tell me that this is part of who I am? No, it isn't part of how you're supposed to be. It's sad and tragic when it happens, but actually we want to get rid of it. And I think that's what Christianity is about. Overcoming the problem of sin. It's not just about judging everyone and saying you're all terrible and there's no hope for you. It's literally like there is hope for you if you recognize and repent of your sin. Then there's an amazing amount of forgiveness. So that's kind of within my box of religious freedom of speech. That's perfectly acceptable to say. Yeah,
because it's within the understanding of Christianity within what's being defined. So the key question is, and I think I've only got 5 minutes left in terms of briefly, if you could say what are you doing about it now, and what should we do next? So recognizing you've got a crowdfund, mention how people can find that, and what that's about, and what do you think we should do next?
Sure. And when I say what we, do you mean Scotland? Do you mean just anyone, or Christians, or who do you want me to
Or
address?
anyone listening to
Anyone.
this.
Okay. Who knows who you are? So, listeners, yeah. So I've got a crowdfunder because we need to, I need to support my family over this time. But I really sense the need to write and plan towards reforming theological education to encourage unashamedly Christian free speech. And by unashamedly Christian, I just mean, kind of this, in a way, to some extent, the stuff we've seen in recent years, where politicians like a Kate Forbes has come under fire for her Christian beliefs in Scotland, or Tim Farron did as leader of the Lib Dems in England, and you think it's just one of those frustrating things where people have the belief that, but they feel they can't really own it and declare it. And I think people have a lot more respect for people when they just really are honest, cards out, open the door. This is what I believe, even if you hate me for it. I believe it's right. I think it's a good thing, and I'm going to stand by it. And as long as you're not doing harm and trying to hurt people, I think it's really important that we do that. So I'm trying to find a way that we can create modes of theological education that help the church to stand upon what they really believe. That's what I will have a passion for. And I think I sense that most of the institutions that we built, the churches have built, whether to train people or to kind of resource the church to do that, so many of them, I don't mean not all of them, there are many really good ones, but so many are worried about their reputation. And I think they need to be reformed in some way. They need to be a kind of a sort of renewal process that happens where we can go, okay, I don't care if you cancel me. I don't care if you pull my validation away. I don't care if you sanction us or say we're not allowed to be a charity anymore, take away our gift aid, whatever it is. We're going to stand on these things because it's what we believe. And if you have to persecute us, then go and do it. Like this happened before. Christianity got where it got to because it was persecuted. And there's a famous, I won't go into theology of the history of the church, for your listeners might be bored by this point, if they're not already, by all of my preacherly rantings. But basically just to say that, that's my heart, is to the crowdfunders to support me and my family. It's completely coincidental, I think. We've got an eviction notice from the house we rent a week after my dismissal, so it's pretty crazy timing. So we're actually trying to find somewhere where we can settle, and be supported to write books and to write and to plan towards this next phase, which is hopefully going to encourage unashamedly Christian free speech. So that process already begun, and hoping that some kind of good things open up and that we can genuinely encourage that. And to be honest, it also will encourage, I hope, people who aren't Christians. I think it's a free speech issue. I think there's a general free speech issue here. And I did have Toby Young from the Free Speech Union, the head of the Free Speech Union, coming. He gave a quote when my story went to the press. He commented on it, and was saying, this is a crazy thing that a Christian can't say Christian beliefs in a Christian college without getting fired. That just shows you the extent to which these ideas of secular progressivism have sort of entered in. And that doesn't just affect Christians, that affects everyone. And just again, Christianity has done an awful lot of good for Western society. You go read Tom Holland's book Dominion, you just think there's a secular historian, Tom Holland, wrote a book, Dominion, The Making of the Western Mind, which did show how so many of the important ideas in the West have occurred because of Christian influence in society. So even if you're like an ardent atheist, I think even Richard Dawkins has come out and said, I think I've been really against Christianity, but I think there are worse things than Christianity, and it's a bulwark against something much worse. So there are all sorts of other ideas out there which could take root in society, which are not allowing people to express free speech. Christianity is pretty tolerant. And so even though I would be seen as intolerant because I think that you can't say certain things that aren't true about what the Bible says, it's not. It's Christianity is incredibly tolerant, forgiving, peaceful. So sometimes we have to fight for peace, but we do care about peace. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. So I would say those who are really happy about the demise of Christianity in the West need to be really careful, because there are worse things out there.
And potentially coming. I think
already
it's already here at the door,
invading. Yes,
invading. I want to leave you with one comment. The verse of the day today, which popped up, and I just saw it, and I thought I'd share it with you. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and does not do it, it is sin for them. James 4:17. And I thought, given we're having this discussion, I thought here is somebody who knows what they feel is the right thing to do and is doing it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing. I'll put a link at the bottom, and yeah, so we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, amen, and God bless Scotland.
Amen. Amen.
Right, it's quite a tale, isn't it? A sadly familiar tale, I suppose. I mean, these sort of things come along reasonably regularly, don't they? People losing their jobs or facing some sort of disciplinary procedure for expressing their beliefs. I'm just amazed often just how weak leaders are in these situations. They just can't withstand a bit of a Twitter storm or a bit of controversy. They can't actually look at the issue fairly and say, right, this is the right thing to do. This is what I'm going to do. Okay, all those people jumping up and down, that'll pass. We're just going to face them down. We're not going with that. But some leaders just seem unable to do that. They cannot resist what they think is popular opinion in an instant. It's often not, but they just can't resist it. I say I'm often just amazed how weak people are. I mean, it's the same with hotels as well. When you make a booking with a hotel, with family party event, and then a couple of people from Glasgow phone up the hotel in Thurso or whatever, and they just cancel you. Yeah, it's just bizarre. Anyway, it's good to hear from Aaron. The mention of same-sex marriage there, that seemed like a sort of settled issue that no one really talked about anymore. I think Kate Forbes has sort of broken the ice on it. Now, you remember I made a lot of comments about Kate Forbes. I think she gained the reputation for fearlessly declaring her beliefs, while she sort of did that some of the time, but maybe most of the time spent her time trying to do everything she could to avoid actually sharing what she believed, because she was in an impossible situation. One of the things she did say that she would have voted against same-sex marriage. And, there's Italy, for example, doesn't have same-sex marriage. The Prime Minister of Italy opposes same-sex marriage. So we tend to think it's something that's done and dusted, and you really are beyond the pale if you oppose same-sex marriage. But, well, there's a lot of people in Scotland who don't agree with it. And there's a lot of people around Europe and around the world as well who sort of hold the traditional view. Now, one of the things with the same-sex marriage debate back in, whenever it was, 2012, 13, 14, people say, what will it lead to next? As soon as you start redefining marriage, where does it end? So what will come next? Well, polyamorous marriage will come on before too long. It's already sort of happening and being hinted at, and the rules have been bent to allow it in various parts of the world. So that's marriages with 3 or more people in them. So that's already going. So the idea of polyamorous relationships, the BBC are already on the case, trying to soften up the population. Channel 4, of course, are always at the cutting edge. They've done programs about, happy thruples and all this sort of thing. So 3-person marriage. So when someone comes along and says, I'm my sexual orientation is that I love 2 people. That's just the way I am. I like 2 partners. I love this person and this person. Why shouldn't I have the right to marry both of them? Why should I be excluded from marriage? Why haven't I got the right to get married? Now, when you put those arguments in the Scottish Parliament, who's going to have an answer to them? Well, quite hard to imagine, wouldn't it? Because that's just the sort of language that makes the Scottish Parliament generally roll over and submit. So if you went to the Scottish Green Party with that argument, I think they'd be pretty open to it. They might think, it's a bit too hot to handle at the moment. We better not go public on this yet. But yeah, obviously, we'd be quite open to that. That would be very progressive, wouldn't it, to allow 3-person marriages. The other thing that floats around in some places is the idea of temporary marriage. Because, if you're married to someone, you don't need to commit for the whole life. But when you have a fixed-term contract, when you have a 5-year contract, special sort of marriage, surely that would give people more options, wouldn't it? Give people more choice. Surely that's the sort of flexibility you need in modern life. I don't know what being modern is going to do this, but that's what they say. In the 21st century, we think this will be a more adaptable model to adopt. So that will be floating around. Open marriage, as well, is already something. Again, Channel 4 will do their documentaries, newspapers will do their stories about celebrities and their open marriages where it's okay for them to go off and have sexual relationships with other people. And again, we find that enriches their marriage, enhances their marriage, and all this sort of junk, and all the evidence says that's just entirely wrong. So how long before people want a version of marriage that takes out the the promise to fidelity. Well, could come along anytime soon. Again, when that goes to Scottish Greens, they will think, well, yeah, that sounds reasonable to us. Everyone's got the right to live as they choose. Yeah. So why should people who don't want to be sexually faithful, why shouldn't they have the right to get married? Yes, we need to redefine marriage. And in Scotland, it's anything the Greens say. 2 years later, the Lib Dems, SNP and Labour are saying it. 4 years later, the Conservatives are saying it as well. So that's the way it's likely to come. I mean, the other way of undermining marriage is to make divorce so easy. So marriage is this solemn, binding contract that you can just leave whenever you feel like it. Break any of the terms of it, nothing happens. It just becomes completely ineffective, and it lacks any sort of power. So we're stepping in that direction as well. So those developments on the marriage front, I think we will see coming along before too long. Let's have a look what we've got here. Okay, right. Interesting. I remember there's up just at the moment. Do keep comments coming in there. Other things we were talking about there. I think what happens with these cases is that there's the victim, if you like, whether they're actually fired or whether they just have a close shave. There's the victim, but then there's the effect that has on everyone else. It's the chilling effect it has on everyone else who's got a mortgage to pay and a family to support, and they just don't want to land themselves in that sort of trouble. So they will be more reluctant to speak what they believe. And then the less people say what they believe, the more outrageous it might seem when someone does actually say the taboo thing. So it's a vicious cycle that the more people are repressed, the more worried people are about saying what they believe, the less people say it, and then the stronger the case to the people who want to suppress free speech. If everyone who believed these things just kept saying them repeatedly every day, then it would be a very different kettle of fish. So, for example, going back to Kate Forbes, when Kate Forbes said she would have voted against same-sex marriage, that meant that everyone in Scotland who doesn't believe that same-sex marriage is a good thing, they're in a stronger position to say so, because when someone comes along and says, we're going to fire you, they can say, that's what Kate Forbes thinks. And that might be quite a good defense. Now, on some other issues, Kate Forbes was absolutely unwilling to state what she believed. Like, she was not going to be forced into saying that, like, killing unborn children is a bad thing, is wrong. She was definitely not going to say that. So when people say killing unborn children is a bad thing, they're in a worse position, because people will think, even Kate Forbes doesn't think that. And so you must be really off the spectrum if you think that. So every time you say something controversial, and not for the sake of it, not something that's like wrong, but every time you state a reasonable view that's controversial, you contribute to the safety of everyone else who's going to say that. Every time you retreat from saying it, you undermine the position of everyone else who might say it. So we're all in it together. We're all in it together. Christian Concern was very good. Supporting people. Christian Concern actually supported me once when I had an issue with an employer. That they sent a suitably snotty lawyer's letter to my employer suggesting that they back off on a certain issue. I don't know if it had much effect. Maybe it did temporarily, but they were soon back to threatening to fire me as usual. So other issues came up there in the interim. I mean, this idea of safety. I mean, we almost need a law that says you're only allowed to use the word safe in terms of physical danger. Using the word safety in terms of how you feel in a group of people having a chat, whether people have been very nice to you, whether they're agreeing with you or not. Using the word safety is just excessive. It raises the stakes in a way that's just completely unreasonable. I feel like the way violence has been redefined. Now, if I remember rightly, the Cambridge English Dictionary now defines violence as actions or words intended to hurt someone. That's the dictionary. Words intended to hurt someone are violence. Now, there'll be a phase where people think of violence as being physical. So therefore, when you use the language, you're sort of exaggerating your point. You're inflating your case by association, by using the word violence. But eventually just the word violent will become so devalued, people will have to start using a new word for actual violence. And then you go through the same cycle again. And then that word becomes devalued. Then you have to think up another word, and you just go through this this cycle, and it goes on and on and on. Right, Gianni, is that the right pronunciation? Have you got policies to raise the maternity leave pay, the lowest in Europe, and scrap the nursery fees, the highest in Europe? Right, let's start with nursery fees first of all. Well, the Scottish Government's policy is to provide more and more free childcare from, well, it's currently rates 3 upwards. They're talking about going down further, down to 1-year-olds even. So as far as nursery fees, I think the Scottish Government is basically pouring money into free childcare, which we feel is a problem, because if people don't want to use it, they still have to pay for it effectively. Whereas parents with kids, so they don't want them to be in nursery, whatever, 5 hours a day or 6 hours a day, whatever, then they should be able to take the cash instead. So there'll be flexibility. Parents can choose. Now, I know that the state nursery provision, the hours of it don't suit some parents, and it's very inflexible. So should there be a scheme whereby you can take like a voucher? So instead of using the nursery at the local school, you go to a private nursery, and you could take a voucher with you and then use it for the hours that suit you better. I would have no problems with that at all. That's not Scottish Family Party policy. I can't make that up on the hoof, but that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. Right, to raise the rate of maternity leave pay, I would say depends who's going to pay it. You're talking about what's paid by the government or what's paid by employers. I think it's a tricky issue with both of them. Because with what's being paid by employers, then I do have an issue. Let's say, imagine you've got a business with 2 employees, and you employ someone, and they start working, and then a couple of weeks later, they announce they're pregnant, and you've got to pay them for not working, and your business model collapses. So that's a bit of a problem, as I see it, because you're not allowed to ask someone if they're like to be pregnant. So what happens is you end up with employers looking at young women and thinking, I'm not giving them a job, because there's a fair chance I'm going to be paying them to not do it. So I'm not going to do that. So it sort of cuts both ways for women. I would say the ideal is for families to be self-sustaining. Now, ideally, if for example, mum wants to be at home with the kids, dad's earning, if they can transfer the tax allowance and get other sort of benefits as well in terms of council tax relief, whatever else. So you have the system where the family can sustain itself quite adequately on one income. Then I think that is an ideal system, and Scottish family parties are geared towards enabling that. So basically, we're more geared towards helping a mum and a dad to make their own decisions in terms of structuring their work-life childcare balance. So if you've got twin incomes, generally people have got plenty of money, you can afford childcare to some degree. But we wanted to make it so that the choice to just have one income and be able to survive on that is more feasible, because currently the system is completely stacked against single income families, and we want to level the playing field there and make it fairer for single income families. Now, I'm guessing that might not have been entirely the answer you were hoping for, but that's what I'm thinking. Tell us what you think. Come back and tell me what you think. Right, I have an opinion on minimum unit pricing for alcohol. My opinion, I think, would be it's not going to work. It's a sort of technocratic solution, because they're always talking about that Scotland's alcohol problem is terrible, and the drug problem is appalling. The alcohol problem is appalling as well. But it's not going to be solved by teaching kids how many units of alcohol are in this, that, and the other, or messing around with the price structure, or stopping football players having the names of lager brands on their shirts, whatever. I think that's not the real issue. The real issue is culture and values, and the government needs to grasp that, and they won't do it because there's a very strong culture, well, maybe more or less worldwide, but certainly in Scotland, that drunkenness is like socially acceptable. So if you, in most groups of people, if you're going to tell a story, I was blind drunk, I fell over and whatever, and that's, people just assume that that's going to be okay. So long as you've got a culture where drunkenness is seen as acceptable, I would say alcohol abuse is seen as acceptable, then you're going to have problem drinking. So to challenge that, you've got to challenge those cultural assumptions, which takes a bit of leadership, which you are never going to get from the, to be honest, from the current crop of parties, at least in the Scottish Parliament, because they won't dare say anything that they think is going to upset the voters. So they've got to try and tackle the issue without actually challenging the core aspect of it, which is attitude and values. So let me know what you think. We need to finish very soon, but yep. Safety, harm, violence, yeah. Islamophobia. Yes, I would say it has been weaponized. Sometimes when people make reasonable criticisms of Islam, they get labeled Islamophobic. Just to clarify on that, I mean, Muslims are very critical of Islam, of Christianity, and some Christians are very critical of Islam. Atheists are critical of both, and that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely the way it should be, and you shouldn't get labeled as having some sort of mental illness because you criticize something. Now, something that you would call Islamophobic would be someone who appeared to have a sort of irrational or emotional hostility towards Muslims. He wished them ill in some way. Then I can imagine that you might be able to use that term appropriately to some people, but it gets applied much, much more broadly, as I'm sure you agree. Right, I need some education on that, I'm afraid. Amniocentesis. I think I've heard that term before, but we're right at the end of the live stream, so I haven't got time just to go to my phone and look that up. But put that in the comments early next week, and let's work out what that's all about. Okay. Now, the Hayward report. Now, that's the big report into Scottish education, isn't it? It's the blind leading the blind. It's just part of the blob. The Scottish educational blob all think the same. They all read the same things. They just spend the time going around to each other's events and training each other, talking to each other and saying the same things to each other, patting each other on the back for repeating the same old lines. And this will be more of the same. It will be more of the same. So will it make it worse? Yes. Yes, it will. Scottish education needs someone coming in who's got their own vision and is going to challenge the juggernaut. And it would be quite a battle ahead, quite a battle. Even someone with the most refined diplomatic skills trying to steer the ship of Scottish education would have a real tough task on their hands. Yeah, because you'll be taking on the unions, the GTCS, Education Scotland, a majority the teacher training institutions, and a substantial portion of existing teachers. Just because they've been brought up, they've been inducted into this ideology. Senior teachers, head teachers, often they've got to where they are by realizing this is the stuff you have to spout to get there. So, yeah, a very, very difficult job to steer the ship. I think it can be done, but we need someone very single-minded and determined, and it'll be a long process over many years. That's not to say the whole thing needs like dismantling and scrapping. I mean, there's lots that's good about Scottish education, but the things that are wrong, they're like universal wall-to-wall progressive ideology that is just a one-way street. That needs just balancing up. It needs reining in one area after another. And yeah, maybe one day the Scottish Family Party, when we've got some MSPs, who knows when what influence we might have over education. Right, I will leave it there. Thanks very much for your comments and questions. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. We've got a special guest next week. I can't quite remember who it is at the moment. Remember, if you haven't joined the Scottish Family Party, now is as good a time as any. So enjoy the rest of your evening and good night.